Well, let's get going. Hey, welcome into the greenhouses at Olson's Greenhouse. I'm sitting in the middle of one of our several hydrangea greenhouses where we grow big leaf hydrangeas, Hydrangea macrophylla. And we ship at Olson's Greenhouse to stores all over the Western United States, from Walmarts to Home Depots to Costco's. And that's where you can find these beauties from Olson's Greenhouse in one of those retailers that's close to you. We started shipping a couple weeks ago, these hydrangeas, and if you haven't picked one up already, my goal today is to hopefully convince you that they are not as hard as you might have heard they are to keep looking great for the entire growing season. In fact, I was convinced just a few years ago, I thought hydrangea macrophylla, the ones we sold here in Utah especially, I knew that they didn't do good in the landscape. So I thought most people were buying them as indoor plants. But I quickly learned, as some of you showed me, that they make great container plants outdoors on a patio or a front porch. So I'm going to go give you several tips and techniques today to show you how to easily do that, and just make sure you cover a few of their basic needs. They can be divas at times, but as long as you cover just a few of these basic needs, you're going to have success with them, and they'll look as gorgeous as the day you buy them for months to come. So glad you're in here. Glad you're tuning in with us. And if you have any questions along the way, please pop them into the chat, and I'll be watching that, and I'll get those answered for you right away. Well, let's get started. For just right off the bat, I want to talk about the differences between the two main types of hydrangeas, which are hydrangea macrophylla, or big leaf hydrangea, or mop head hydrangeas. That's what I'm sitting around right now. Um, Hydrangea macrophylla, we actually call these florist hydrangeas, and these varieties are specifically bred to have bigger blooms. They may not be as hardy as landscape hydrangeas and some of the older varieties, but here in the Mountain West, especially in states like Utah and Colorado, we really don't have the conditions to grow macrophylla very well as a landscape plant. But they do great as an annual plant, especially in containers. And as long as you give them the right conditions, they'll continue to look as great as what we're growing here in the greenhouse for several months. And so hydrangea macrophylla here in Utah especially needs to be grown as an annual plant. We just don't have the great conditions for it like you see in the northeastern United States, in New England and places like that, Nantucket. Those are landscape varieties of hydrangea macrophylla, and they just do better in those climates. What's the difference between here in Utah and some of the coastal climates where they do perform well? Well, the biggest one is just the humidity. You've got to have high humidity to really grow these well, and have them come back year after year and continue to set new big buds and to grow into a shrub, basically. We just don't have that here. The other thing is good, fertile, well-draining soil. A lot of places out here in the Midwest and in the Western US don't have great soil. And then the final thing is just the winter temperatures. Um, those can kill any new flower buds that are forming over the winter on those landscape varieties. The good news is, though, landscape varieties are bred to be bigger, but they only come in a couple colors, whereas these floral varieties are bred to have many more colors. So we have not only pink, but we now have dark pink, and we have different shades of lavender. We have pure whites, a lot of things that do great in containers on a florist hydrangea that maybe don't do so good out in the landscape. So we get more than just the standard pastel blue and pastel pink colors when we're talking about hydrangeas here. Uh, the other thing uh, that is against these hydrangeas is just the pH of the water and the soil, especially here in Utah. We have such high pH. And that's okay if you want pink ones, but really it's really too high to really go grow good macrophylla hydrangeas. And so we sell them this way in containers for you. What's the difference? Are you doomed to never be able to have hydrangeas in your landscape? in Utah or Colorado? No, not at all. The answer is there's another variety that actually performs really well. Here in Utah, especially, it's Hydrangea paniculata. These are usually white varieties that turn different colors in the fall, but you're talking about things like limelight, little lime, or incredible. Well, those are varieties that are paniculatas or panicle hydrangeas, and they do great in the landscape here. Also because they love full sun, and we have a lot of sun here in Utah. So uh, we're talking about a different beast, though. These macrophyllus are totally different than paniculata. So that's number one. You got to understand what you're dealing with, but it doesn't mean that they can't perform in your in your yard as long as you treat them the right way. So let's get into that real quick. So here's your first tip on making hydrangeas look great. Grow them in containers. Don't worry about putting them in the soil. The soil is kind of not set up to be great for them. So we can give them ideal conditions in a container pot, especially a larger volume container pot. Um, Hydrangea needs lots of water. We'll talk about watering in a little bit. And the more soil volume you can provide to it, the better. The more of a buffer between waterings. If you forget to water for a day, as long as you've got more soil volume, you might be able to get through that a little bit easier than if you were growing them in a smaller pot. So if you pick one up at Costco, it's in an 8-inch pot. You may want to consider upsizing that, adding more potting mix around it, and growing that in a little bit bigger container. So that can help. But containers can be moved easily. We'll talk about temperature in a little bit. When you have cold nights, you can move them into a garage to protect them. I knew we were going to have a cold night last night. I set my hydrangeas next to the garage, but then when I got home from work, forgot to bring them in, and they saw 37 degrees. So that's the second thing we'll talk about is temperature. These hydrangea macrophyllus don't like to be below 40. So I left them out last night, got to 37 for about an hour in my town. And I woke up this morning, went out and checked on them, and uh, I thought they did great. I thought they made it through okay. And maybe we needed to revise our temperature scale a little bit. But lo and behold, I went back at lunch and I had watered them going into the night to make sure they could that would help them sustain colder temps. Um, and I had water on the blooms, which is usually a good thing. But I don't know if it was the water or just the cold temp in general, but several of the blooms are starting to turn brown. Now, it didn't kill the plant. It didn't even kill those blooms. And there's still a lot of petals that look great. And there's new buds coming out that still look great. So, but ideally, hydrangeas don't like to be below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So, and ideally, they would be in the 60s to low 70s all day long and all night long. And that's what we kind of give them here in the greenhouse to make them look so great. So if you could give them that perfect, what I like to do when I use them at home is just bring them inside a garage whenever we get below 40 degrees. So keep that tip in mind for the temperature. Again, if you're with us and you have any questions along the way, feel free to pop them in the chat and I'll get to them. But the second thing I want to go over, besides container watering, or the third thing actually, using them in containers, and then second, making sure that you give them the right temperature, is the most important thing with hydrangeas, and that is water. Hydra stands for water, and they love water. But a couple things, they don't like to sit in water, so you don't want overly moist soil. I brought a container home, a decorative container that I got from Hobby Lobby, and it had a cocoa mat liner on it, but then it had a plastic insert to hold water in, and I never cut a slit or a drainage hole in it, and I didn't realize that, and I set my hydrangea in it and watered it every day for a couple weeks, and it started to wilt like it was dry. And it only took about 2 weeks for it to show signs of overwatering, and I lifted it up and realized it was saturated, and it was getting overwatered. I quickly realized overwatering can lead to root rot, and so I pulled it out, drained the water out, set it outside of that decorative pot. It was still in the grower pot that I was growing it in, and it did recover, but it never looked as good as it be when I first got it. So you don't want to overwater either. But the bigger problem most people run into with hydrangeas is just underwatering. They need constant moisture available to them. If they dry out, they wilt and they wilt fast. It starts in the blooms will shrivel up. And then if the stems start to wilt down, you know you've gone way too long. You can miss this by an hour and you can really do some harm to your plants. So you want to make sure you get on a schedule and constantly water them. In the cooler part of the spring, like right now, you might be able to go 2 days if you have temps below 70. Might be able to go 2 days, depending on how big your container is. But quickly, as we're in the 70s, 80s, and even above that, they will need water every day and sometimes twice a day if we get into the 90s and hundreds later on. So make sure you're giving plenty of water. Make sure they're always watered. Some people say the finger test. Make sure you stick your finger in the soil an inch, and you should be able to feel moisture. That means they're watered. And if it's dry, they need it right away. I just like to do the weight test. I tip them over or lift them up, and I know if they're light, they're dry. If they're medium, they're kind of needing water soon. And if they're heavy, they're plenty wet for the next day. So I usually do the weight test. And then if you do miss a watering and dry them out and they're starting to droop, two things. If it's just the petals that are drooping, you can water them overhead and get water droplets on those petals. They'll take in water through their blooms. They're very unique as a flower that way, and that will help them recover faster, actually. So I like to water them overhead with some sprinkles and then water the soil at the same time. If it's gone farther than that and the whole stem is drooping down, then you need to take more drastic measures. So water the soil right away, but peat moss can become hydrophobic when it dries out, and it can push that water away and around the edges and out the drain holes before it really starts soaking it up and giving it to the plant. And so what I like to do with hydrangeas, especially grown in containers, is get a 5-gallon bucket, fill it a quarter to a halfway with water, and then dunk the plant in there and leave it for half an hour to an hour. Let it soak that water up through capillary action and get that whole root ball wet again, and help rehydrate the peat moss. So, and then it'll take about 12 hours to perk back up. Now you can only do this, dry it down like 2 or 3 times before it really shows the sign of wear. You might lose fully open blooms. It won't kill the plant, but it's hard to keep those blooms looking great for a long time if you dry it down too many times. So I would suggest using a drip irrigation system or some way where you don't have the chance of forgetting about it. We water everything here in the greenhouse with drip. You can see one of the drip right here. There, I'll hold it up. So this is on a stake, but this is a drip emitter. We have 2 per pot, and we just make sure it stays in that soil with a stake, but you don't have to use stake drip emitters if you can find something else that sticks in there. But make sure they're on a sprinkler timer that is set to water at least once a day, and when we get above the 90s, it's watering more often than that. So um, that's a great tip on watering. Whatever you do, just don't miss waterings, and you can get these blooms to last once they open for like 10 to 12 weeks or even longer. We had some last year that lasted us 14 weeks from opening their buds, like this right here. This is a bud that just started opening in the last week, and this one's a few days in front of it, opened a little bit longer. But from this stage to wilt and drying up of those blooms, you can go 12 weeks. And so that's the next thing we'll talk about is care and how long can you expect for them to perform for you. So 12 weeks on the buds that just opened, and you can buy one with some tight buds coming behind it, and that will give you a few more weeks even beyond that. It's hard to really get them to set more buds after they come out of the greenhouse, but it is possible, and you'll get a few throughout the summer. So really, you can enjoy hydrangea blooms from now in late April all the way through July at least. And if you pick the right plant that has some tight buds on it, you might even get into August with brand new fresh blooms. And then they start to dry out, but they don't look bad when they dry out. So I like to keep my hydrangeas clear into the fall. They make a great plant with it's not a brown dried bloom, but it's kind of it fades its color and turns more of a greenish color usually, and they still look good. So you can really have these hydrangeas from now through the summer, spring and summer, and into the fall until the first frost finally kills the plant eventually. We got a question from LAC. So uh, they say mine are coming back from year's pots. Will they bloom this year? The leaves are not on the old wood. They're new from the bottom. So it depends on the variety. If you bought them as one of these florist hydrangeas, they very well could bloom for you again. That's the thing about most landscape hydrangea macrophylla. Uh, actually only bloom on old wood, year-old wood. So if that year-old wood dies back, they don't set their blooms again. But these varieties that we grow at Olson's greenhouse and call them florist hydrangeas, these are varieties that are actually bred to bloom on new wood. So they can bloom again this year. What you've got to worry about is sometimes those blooms are set on new wood, on new stems that just grew this year, but a late frost can kill those buds and they may never recover from that. So it is hard to get them to bloom if they see cold temperatures, especially if you have them in the landscape. But if you baby them, absolutely, you can get them to bloom on new wood if they are this floral type of hydrangea, macrophyllas. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, you're saying it was a florist type from Sam's Club. We didn't grow the ones for Sam's Club, but I would pretty much bet that they are similar varieties that do bloom on new wood. So I would fertilize those. Still keep them in a container. You said they were in pots still, so keep them in that container, but give them a little bit of fertilizer. If they were blue last year, they might come back pink this year. Depending on where you live, if you've got high pH water like we do in Utah, uh, it's a tough battle to make that pH low enough. It's got to be super acidic to be able to get the blue color. So they will change from blue to pink with higher pH water. You can try and combat that with acidic fertilizer and doing that every couple weeks. I would just do it at a low rate, maybe half the rate, but you can use any all-purpose water-soluble fertilizer that says acidic on it. And that will help you there. So uh, let's talk about color for a second. The other thing is traditionally hydrangea macrophylla is offered in blue or pink, and it's changed. The flower color changes based on the pH that the plant gets. These new varieties come in all sorts of different colors, from white to lavender. I'm looking at different burgundies right now, hot pinks, soft pinks. We've got several varieties in this greenhouse that are different colors, and they are bred to be a little less susceptible to the pH changes. But when we sell a blue hydrangea, we still acidify the water that we're providing to it every time we water. And you can see sometimes we might miss, like some of these are more blue than others, some are more pink. They might not get as much acidity, and they'll start to go back to revert to pink, even on the blooms that have already started to come out and emerge. So that's it with the color. If you do want blue, you've really got to be persistent about acidifying your water, or you're adding acidic fertilizer to keep that pH down a lot lower than normal. All right, so we've talked about watering. We talked about make sure you grow them in containers, especially so you can protect them from cold temps. The last thing I just want to go over is right next to watering, probably just as important, is sun exposure. You can give these full sun in the right climate, and those climates are kind of rare, like the Pacific Northwest or New England states. Because there's so much humidity in those states, the sunlight is not nearly as intense. But here in the mountains, especially in Utah and Colorado, we're so much closer to the sun, and the air is so much drier that sunlight is more intense, and it will burn these things up. Hydrangea macrophylla, in Utah especially, has to have full shade. I call it bright shade though. If you've got sidewalks near that are reflecting some light into that shade, that's ideal for them. Or a porch that does see a little bit of light on the edges that gets reflected in, that's perfect for them. They can get a tiny bit of morning sun as long as it's not too hot outside. but they really need to be protected from direct sunlight. Uh, no more than like 30 minutes a day of early morning direct sunlight. And for the most part, mine are on a north facing porch. It never sees a drop of sunlight, but it is bright shade, and they do great all summer long because of that. So the sunlight will actually dry up the leaves, it will burn the blooms, make them turn brown, and slowly kill the plant. So in this climate, so sometimes the tags are a little misleading because they're meant for other parts of the country where they actually do well. But full shade, even if it says part sun or full sun on a hydrangea macrophylla, in these climates, you've got to have full shade. All right, so those are my tips on growing hydrangea macrophylla. It's not as hard as you think. This is a really easy plant to grow. As long as you protect it from the sun, make sure it never dries out, you can keep it looking as good as the day you picked it up from the store uh, for several months. And nothing makes a bigger statement than a big mop head hydrangea bloom, especially in some of those bold, bright colors like hot pink or bright lavender, or just solid, pure white that you can get. Nothing makes a better statement than those, especially in your entry areas or your back patios, wherever you have full shade or maybe just like slightly filtered sunlight, but mostly shade coming in. You've got the perfect climate. Just set them up on a system where you don't ever forget to water them, and I promise you, you'll do great with hydrangea macrophylla. So if you've tried them in the past and did not have success, I can encourage you to try them again and just follow these few tips and let us know. We're going to save this video so others can watch it that might have missed on the live stream, and share it with your friends. Give it a like if they gave you any new information that you didn't have before. And if you do see this after the live is recorded, or if you're watching now on the live, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know if you've had success and if you've had some failures with them, if you're willing to try again based on what you learned today. I'm Brian Lloyd with Olson's Greenhouse and Dig in the Yard. Thanks for watching. And no matter what you do, whether you grow hydrangeas or not, keep getting after it, and I'll see you in the yard. See you guys.